It's not a funeral, but it certainly feels like one. Michael, happy Friday.
Yeah, it's always tough, Patrick. I always think of days like today. I'm reminded of the great Hyman Roth. This is the business we've chosen, and you're going to have days like this. And, it's, as much as you don't want your sons to go through what you went through, Springsteen has a great song, about that and Long Road Home and A Long Time Coming. And so, you don't want your kids to experience all the disappointments in their life that you've experienced. You want the better thing, and yet, this game last night was one of those where you had every chance for them to win the game. They should have won the game, and yet they did things that prevented them from winning the game, players, coaches, and within their scheme. So it's hard. It's hard. It's hard as a father. But you have to be honest and objective. I mean, the Raiders have no one to blame, as I wrote about today. They have no one to blame but themselves. I mean, it was truly, truly a Hallmark movie last night.
Okay. Deep breath. 17-16 winner for the Rams. If I could just take a second to say a couple things. So I was at the game with Michael's wife, Millie, and Pat and Bernadette. Had a wonderful time. Wonderful people. So where we were sitting, right to your left, is Mick Lombardi, the offensive coordinator. We were right on that sideline. So we could see him the whole entire time. And I have to tell you, you have to be built differently to be involved in this business, because it's not just you're dragging your family through it. And what I mean by that is, if you don't think Millie is living and dying with every single play, she is so emotionally invested in this. She lives and dies with every play. And it really brought me perspective. And I'm going to let you rant here in a little bit, but it really brought me perspective that what we do as bettors or just as fans is we crush coaches, and sometimes we turn them into non-entities. These are real people with real families, and I have to tell you, I'm almost mad at you that you got me close to this family, because I watch. It's such an emotional freaking roller coaster. Losing that game, I can't even imagine what Mick and the coaching staff and the players feel like today. I literally can't imagine it.
Well, you just, it's part, like I said, it's the business you've chosen. You're not going to, it's not a Hollywood movie. You're not going to win every game. You're going to have these disappointments. It's how you handle them. It's how you rise above them. It's how you move forward. It's how you learn from them, right? And there's so much to learn from that game. There's so much to learn for a young coach, a young head coach, Josh McDaniels, everybody. There's so much to learn. And it really was, and you have to be honest, and you just can't say, well, Derek Carr threw an interception, or this happened, or they didn't call holding on the last drive. None of that's relevant. It's a combination of all these things. And you've got to be honest, and you've got to make a decision on how you want to proceed moving forward, because this is a business where only the strong survive, and you got to be strong.
You have to have mettle. You have to have strong. You have to live in the moment. You have to move on. It's all the cliches, but it is very true. So good job by Elliot, the producer. We're going to start with the Raiders side here. Let's start at the end, and then we'll back up. If you had Baker Mayfield 36 hours into his Rams career, going 8 plays and 98 yards and 8 plays in a minute 35 to win this game, then you're a better person than I. Yeah. Let's start with that last drive. I left, Michael, with the punt. It's one of the great punts you're ever going to see, by the way, an end-over-end punt that rolls down to the 2-3 yard line. I had to go get an Uber. I wasn't going to get home till midnight if I didn't leave, but I assumed there's no way this guy that just landed there is going to drive this team back. Let's talk about the drive. What went wrong defensively? What went right offensively for the Rams?
Well, I think a lot of the situational football was really bad by the Raiders defensively on that drive, because they had no timeouts left. And so all you wanted to do was keep the ball in bounds and make him have to hold the ball longer. And when you play man coverage like they did, and he can make a throw, now they get called for holding on one play. They have an interception, they get called for holding. Then they come back and they sack him. We're going to be 2nd and 19. With the clock running, and then Tillery touches the ball away from Baker Mayfield as he's standing there, and my man, God love, Carl Pagnelli called tripping against me in Denver years ago, cost me home field advantage. God knows when Carl Pagnelli makes a call, I'm going to die, right? And it got me again last night. He calls unsportsmanlike conduct on Tillery for touching the ball. Right? Was it? I guess it was. I don't know. Only Carl knows, but I know this. Carl and the Raiders, it's never a good call. So they get 15 yards, 1st and 10, and then Pat Graham decides to play man coverage when he doesn't have to play man coverage. Like the clock was running. Tackle him in bounds, make Baker hold the football, and then they have the ball 1st and 10 at the 22 with 15 seconds to go in the game or 20 seconds to go in the game, and they play man coverage with no help on top, and they throw the ball in the end zone. Like Baker had to throw the ball in the end zone. He couldn't have thrown it short, and yet you played that coverage. Like that's wrong. And I've said this to my son this morning when we had a conversation. Like, you can't do that. Like, that's situational football at its worst. And the Raiders have no one to blame but themselves.
Okay, let's be objective here. The defensive coordinator, Pat Graham, going man there. You could be somebody that's playing junior high football and know that's the wrong decision. What was he thinking on that touchdown pass?
I don't know.
How does he not have help over top? I don't understand.
I don't know. I don't understand it either. Like, why weren't we just like, it didn't even like rush 3 and drop 8. Make Baker have to and read Baker's eyes. Where's he going with the football? Let that clock keep running. But, again, these are why you lose games, because you don't handle situational football well and you make bad calls. We always criticize the offense for bad calls. That was a bad call by the defense, and it cost them. And that wasn't and it wasn't just Pat Graham costing them. I mean, it was, okay, Carr throws that interception at the end of the first half, and the Raiders' offense went completely conservative. They were scared to death he was going to turn the ball over, and they behaved as if they had a great defense. I text my wife during the game and said, if they don't get to 20 points, it's going to be a problem.
Yep.
Got to get to 20.
You said I think he said it before the half, or maybe right at half. He said that if they don't get to 20, they're going to lose this football game. They lost 17-16. You literally said that. I was sitting right there.
And so you have to know this, right? And so they went 3 and out twice, and they got very conservative. They were scared Carr was going to make a mistake. They only threw the ball 20 times. They had no passing game in the second half. They make the play down the field. They got the ball They got the ball in the red zone, and they have to score. If they score a touchdown there, the game's over. The game is over if they score that touchdown. They kick the field goal. They keep them in it. Then they jump off sides on the punt. How many more things can you do wrong?
That special teams mistake, Millie and I were like, "Are you?" By the way, there were 2 penalties on that punt. 2 penalties against the Raiders.
The holding call. The holding call is, but Farrell jumps off sides. Like, are you kidding me? And what made it worse was they were called for holding the play before. We could have backed them up to 3rd and 14.
Okay, let's do this. And you mentioned conservative play calling. Look at Jacobs. He ran the ball 27 times. After that red zone pick, and I could see how demonstrative McDaniels was. He was so pissed because Devontae Adams was wide open. Carr throws a pick in the red zone. They go into the break. And
Devontae's the first read on the play.
He's always the first read
on the He's so all you got to do is get him the football. And then they went completely conservative, and they didn't extend. They felt like, okay, they got Baker Mayfield. They're not going to move the ball, and we'll win this game. And they miscalculated it. Look, they got 2 first downs in the entire second half. They got 2 first downs. Meanwhile, the Rams, playing with Baker Mayfield, got 12 first downs in the fourth quarter alone. When that missed field goal occurred, and they got the ball with 2 minutes, and they extended it into the fourth quarter, and they didn't score the touchdown there. And I said before the game, remember, we were leaning towards the Rams, and everybody Lombardi just doesn't want to jinx the Raiders. No, they're the second best red zone team in all of football. Like, you needed to score touchdowns in this game. And this, if you're gonna make a highlight film with the great John Facenda reading the Raider highlights, you're going to say failure in the red zone. This is their season. They failed in the red zone. Tennessee game, Charger game, Jacksonville game. It's been every game they failed to make plays in the red zone. And they've got guys open.
They did have guys open. The good news is you gave out the under. That does cash. And one other thing with the conservative play calling, let's not forget, they needed 1 yard, and the game was over. They needed 1 yard prior to that punt.
Right.
Go ahead.
And Jacobs makes a great run, and they run that 1-yard run, and they get stuffed. I mean, look, losing Simpson, the right guard, when he came in, that was a real problem for him. I mean, they were working around him all night because he wasn't really ready to play. So for me, that became an issue. But to me, you got to get that first down there. You got to get that. That's why, what do I say all the time? I say this all the time. 3rd and short determine playoff wins. 3rd and short determine games. If you don't have great 3rd and short calls, you're done. You're going to lose games. And how many games are lost by 3rd and 1? Let's go back Monday night. The Saints, 3rd and 1. If they get that first down, they're going to win the game. They don't. He throws a pass, it gets incomplete. They lose. Same situation. I mean, in the span of 4 days, we saw 2 teams come back from 16-3 leads, lose 16-3 leads.
When we come back, you're going to hear from McDaniels. You're going to hear from McVay. We've got plenty more to do. The Lombardi Look Ahead is available for VSiN Pros, VSiN.com/subscribe. You're not going to want to miss it. Unfortunately, I had to laugh because he was very funny calling this a Hallmark movie. Was that Baker Mayfield or Meredith Baxter Birney out there last night? Lifetime.
I mean, it was the miracle of Baker. It was the miracle of Baker. I got my neighbor, Uncle Don, who loves to watch Hallmark movies. I'm going to see if he wants to pitch it to Hallmark. It's a hell of a show.
The Hollywood sign was miles away, and Baker wrote an improbable script. We'll go to the Rams next. What a disaster. A good stat from Elliott. Teams are now 4 and 551 when trailing by 13 or more points in the final 4 minutes in the last 5 seasons, including the playoffs. Half of those 4 wins have come in the last 4 days. Tom Brady and Baker Mayfield as we transition.
Mayfield, unbelievable.
If you had, by the way, and he's Michael Lombardi, I'm Patrick Meagher, this is VSiN. If you had Baker being traded from the Browns to the Carolina Panthers, then claimed by a desperate defending champion LA Rams team, and then 36 hours going 98 yards and 8 plays in a minute 35, when he wasn't even playing quarterback, because as you mentioned in the Lombardi Look Ahead, Sean McVay was playing quarterback last night.
Yeah. Now, I don't know. I had the sound off, so I don't know if they talked about it. You were at the game, so you didn't hear it either. But to me, this was all McVay. I mean, every time there was a timeout and Baker came to the sideline, the next play was a completed pass. Because what McVay said to him was, look, we're going to run all these words, and I want you to throw it to that guy on the 5th. Just throw it there. He'll be open. And Baker did. Now, it's funny, because all those throws Baker was making for the Rams last night, he wasn't even throwing them for the Panthers. I mean, they were running the same exact plays. He wouldn't even throw them. He wouldn't throw them. And for some reason, he played loose last night. And maybe because he had McVay in his ear saying, okay, here, you're going to throw it here. Throw the out route to the tight end. I mean, on 3rd down, remember that 3rd and 10 they converted? I mean, Crosby this is on the 9-minute drive. Crosby got held tremendously on that. They didn't call it. Yep. It was unbelievable. I mean, but, that's what happens. You can blame the officials, but at the end of the day, the Raiders have no one to blame but themselves. I mean, and you've got to be man enough to say, this is where we messed up. You got to be able to do that. You're not going to make any progress as a team if you don't admit it.
Okay, well, let's hear what the head coach had to say. Here's Josh McDaniels after the game.
This is the National Football League. If you let them hang around long enough, it comes down to, one possession, a couple plays, and who makes them, So, like I said, this isn't an offensive, defense, or a special teams thing. It's a team thing. We got to be able to, extend the lead if we have one, and keep competing, not let our foot off the gas, no relaxing, and try to play the same way we were playing when we had when the game starts, and so just obviously I haven't done a good enough job of being able to get us to do that.
Well, that's diplomatic, not blaming the defense and taking accountability. The Raiders were 20-2 when leading by double digits at the half in the previous 10 seasons. They're 0-4 this year. That is quite an anomaly and a weird stat.
Well, I mean, it is, and they've got a lot of work to do, and they got to address it. They can't blame it on Carl Pagnelli, who deserves some of it, but they can't. They can't blame it on the bad crew. They can't blame it on we just hit a hot quarterback. No, they got to have honest meetings with themselves, and this isn't just like I said earlier today. This isn't just it was the coaching fault. It was the players and the scheme, and I think when they look back on this game, I think when Josh watches the tape today, I think he realizes he got way too conservative in the second half. As he just said in that video there, you can't let teams hang around. And all the while, you knew that you needed to kind of get going. And your quarterback wasn't really, for some reason, Carr was never comfortable in that pocket the entire game. Never. I mean, never. He had a 36.9 quarterback rating, the worst of his career. The worst of his career last night against a team he shouldn't have. Like, for some reason, whether it was the short week, I don't know what it was, but he didn't play well. They didn't obviously prepare him well enough. And to think that their defense was going to stop anybody was a mistake.
Yeah, it's interesting. In person, you get a different vantage point. Your son, Mick Lombardi, the offensive coordinator, he's much more hands-on with the players. He kind of stands, I'd say, 20 feet away from McDaniels. McDaniels is, the way he coaches, he's on an island. He stands by himself. He's with his sheet. I'm sure he's dealing with, in the headset, he's dealing with a lot of things that are going on. But I'm telling you, he was demonstrative last night in his frustration with Carr because he saw things that Carr simply wasn't seeing, and Carr looked shook behind that offensive line.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I think a lot of that was the conservative nature. I'm not absolving Josh on this. His quarterback rating, Carr, in the second half was 0-0. I mean, think about that, Patrick. He didn't even have one. So they just went into their shell. And look, maybe that was the right thing to do because you shouldn't allow a team to go 96 yards with no timeouts and a minute 40 to go in the game or a minute 45. You should be able to get off the field there. So they probably did play it right, but then they didn't complement it with their defense by playing it right. And give the Rams credit. I mean, the Rams hung in there. This is exactly what they wanted to do. They played great in the red zone. They hung around. They didn't give up a big run. They were able to keep Adams from hurting them. How, I don't know. I got to watch the tape today. Because Ramsey didn't trail with them every game, and Ramsey wasn't playing very well either.
Just 3 catches for 71 yards. Devontae Adams, he had 2 catches that weren't good. They were great. I mean, he's one of the great receivers you're ever going to watch. He is just
no doubt.
He's so interesting in person to watch because what a build. Now, let's go to the Ram side of this, and let's start with McVay. What I saw in person here, Michael, was what he did that I thought was strategically brilliant was he constantly only had Baker focusing on one half of the field. So he didn't complicate things. He just said, this is where you're throwing to this side of the field, this play, or you're going to this side. I'm simplifying it, but that seems like what he did.
No, that's exactly what he did. He basically called the play and then told Baker, throw the ball to the crosser or throw the 9, throw it outside here. That's what he did. And we're going to hit the tight end. The tight end should be open here. Just give him a good ball to catch. And so he basically played quarterback for him. He took the game away. And then when that clock clicked off, that was it. And when they had timeout, when he came over to the sideline, you could see them. Then he had a little bit more time to say, okay, here's what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to do. And he did a great job. Look, the Rams, and for them not to be, they didn't even run the ball effectively in the game. I mean, they had a few runs, but they weren't able to really run the ball. But Mayfield made enough plays. And look, let's face it, the Raiders allowing them to hang around, it gave them an opportunity. I mean, Baker averaged 5.4 per attempt. I mean, they averaged 4.6 yards per play, the Rams. I mean, it wasn't like they were electrifying. The Raiders allowed them to hang around, and the Raiders shot themselves in the foot. And that's what happens in games. I mean, that's what happens to you. When you're 1 for 4 in the red zone, you got a chance to lose the game, and then you don't lock out the fourth quarter. You don't get a first down in the fourth quarter. You're going to lose a game.
Well, as you noted in the look ahead, when you settle for 3 quarters of field goals, there's going to be a wild fourth quarter, and that's really what the Raiders. It's really what happened with I can't ever remember thinking what a back-breaking interception. That going into the half with an opportunity to go up even more and throwing that pick, you were like, uh-oh, this second half is going to get weird.
Yeah, especially because it really affected them. You could see it affected them. It affected their play calling. It affected everything about their team. And the Rams knew it too. I mean, Raheem Morris did a great job of knowing it. Like, they're not even going to try to throw it on us. Like, we don't have to worry about it. So they were able to do that.
It was a hell of a job by Sean McVay. We'll get to Baker in a second. Here's McVay talking about the game.
I think just he plays fast. You know, you could see when he sees things, he can speed it up. He's got great upper body twitch. And you could just feel, even on the third down conversion to Ben Skoranek, you know, where he's kind of sitting in the pocket, he quickly exhausts the progression. That's on the backside, and he delivers a strike versus a man coverage right on the body. So I was really impressed. I don't know if I would say surprised, because I've always been a fan of the things that he was capable of, but to say that I expected this, I mean, certainly exceeded our expectations, but it was a lot of fun watching him go to work tonight.
Different vibe in person. McVay on the sideline, he's kinetic, he's up and down it. He's talking into, how many seconds does he get to talk to Baker? Because he used more than that. I mean, he was given dissertations before every play to Baker Mayfield.
Then that's what he did with Goff, you know, and that's supposed to click off, I think, with 15 seconds on the play clock. But, you know, and so, you know, he just, and I'm not saying he did anything illegal. He just is a really good coach who understands how to attack a scheme, and he put his personality into Baker's play. And as when they get ready to play other teams, you know, teams will play Baker differently. I mean, the Raiders didn't rush him inside. You got to pressure Baker inside. Make him have to. And Baker made some really good throws. I mean, one throw on the out throw on third down. I mean, Chandler Jones is on his arm, and he makes a good throw. I mean, he played the best. If he'd have played like that for Carolina, you know, they might have won 2 games.
It was weird in person because Baker, obviously not a big guy, but we didn't know when he came in. Is that John Wolford or is that Baker Mayfield? Because the way that, you know, Wolford goes in for one series, he was kind of, I have to tell you, Baker was he was impressive because he was getting pressured. And I don't think he has the biggest arm in the world, Michael, but he has enough to make every throw. You didn't see any of that in Carolina. It was really strange.
I mean, look, the other thing is, too, the Rams got 5 first downs by penalties.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.